Howdy, I'm Kate Kavanaugh, and you're listening to the Mind, Body, and Soil podcast, where we're laying the groundwork for our land, ourselves, and for generations to come by looking at the way every thread of life is connected to one another. Communities above ground mirror the communities below the soil, which mirror the vast community of the cosmos. As the saying goes, as above, so below. Join me as we take a curious journey into agriculture, biology, history, spirituality, health, and so much more. I can't wait to unearth all of these incredible topics alongside you. Hello, and welcome to the Mind, Body, and Soil / Groundwork podcast, where we are in the forever liminal space of a name change. I am your grateful and excited host, Kate Kavanaugh, and on this show, we explore the threads of what it means to be humans woven into this earth. And today's episode is just about as great of an example as I can imagine for that topic. Today, my guest is Marguerite Holloway, whose new book, Take to the Trees, a story of hope, science, and self-discovery in America's imperiled forests, is out, and we have an incredible conversation around it. I have been thinking about forests a lot. I come from the West. If you don't know, I come from the Rocky Mountain West, and grew up experiencing a lot of prairie, but also a lot of the pine forests and aspens in the Rocky Mountain range. And then I moved back east, and forests took on a whole different sense for me. In fact, right when I moved back, one of the things I missed the most are the big, wide open spaces and vistas of the West. And I remember finding trees a little cloying at first, and was always looking for an open view on my hikes. But I've come to better learn and better be a part of this ecosystem, because about 15 minutes from my door is an incredible nonprofit called Merck Forest and Farmland Center, where I am a board member. I still don't really know what that means. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I sure do like it. And out there's 3,500 acres, and they are practicing sustainable forestry. And so I've gotten a chance to learn a lot more about forests. And as longtime listeners will know, my thesis statement for the last year and a half or so has been that we used to move our bodies to resources, and now we move resources to our bodies. And with that, everything has changed. Our world, our bodies, our relationship to those resources, which are not just resources. In fact, they are our co-creators and other beings here on Earth, and chief amongst those, for the purposes of this conversation, are trees. And Marguerite does an incredible job of taking us through different species of trees and the problems and circumstances that they face, and also the hope that is possible. And she also takes us on an incredibly personal journey of her getting to experience trees from a very different view as she participates in several women's tree climbing workshops in Massachusetts, right in my backyard. And her personal story is really stunning. The way that she weaves it in is really beautiful. She touches on grief, and she touches on confidence, and she touches on loss and love and care in a way that I found just really touching. And I think with that, I'll tell you that I was a little nervous about recording this, and I think that might show in the recording, but I loved this conversation with Marguerite. It felt intimate and tender in just the most beautiful way. And this book is really beautiful, and I think it asks us to really consider the trees in our lives and just how important they are, and to begin to see them in the foreground of our vision when we are out and about, and to feel that sense of a whole and to seek a different perspective. Couple of other pieces here. I think, first of all, one thing I didn't get to touch on with Marguerite is the book is full of beautiful, beautiful illustrations from Ellen Weiner. And so I just want to point that out, that it's such a treat to have some beautiful botanical illustrations within the book. And I do want to say that I really came to think about Take to the Trees as a sense of refuge, and those places in which we find ecosystems holding us and really caring for us in times of need, and the mutualism that we can derive from that and come back to, and really begin to care for these members of our ecosystem. I can't thank you enough for tuning in to the podcast. I appreciate your listenership so deeply, and there are some opportunities to support both through sponsors, so that helps support the podcast. If that aligns with something that you need and you purchase through the link, that helps support me. And then my Patreon and Substack, which perks are coming, but right now I'm just asking if this is something you enjoy, support it with the price of one coffee per month. And of course, the best way to support is the free one, which is to share this with a friend, share it on social media, hit subscribe for the incredible episodes we have coming up. Like next week will be with Chris Burdick about noise and how we shape the sounds in our environment with his new book, Clamor, and some really exciting episodes after that. I am so thrilled to bring you this conversation with Marguerite Holloway and her new book, Take to the Trees, A Story of Hope, Science, and Self-Discovery in America's Imperiled Forests. It's funny, you and I are actually not very... A lot of the book takes place, so I live just over the Vermont border on the New York side, just outside of Dorset, or Manchester, Vermont. And so a lot of this takes place in my backyard in a way. And so that felt really special to kind of to know some of these trees, at least on some level. Especially, I'm new here. I've only been here 5 years. I'm from the West. And so these trees are new to me, but they still felt familiar, these forests.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just made it as just kind of this fun piece. I'm of two minds on where to start, and I'll tell you what. Let me tell you one little personal tidbit really fast, and then let me ask you a question. And this personal tidbit is, so last year I was standing out. I live on a small farm with my husband, and I was standing out, and we have this big field, and there's a cottonwood tree, which is very dear to me because I'm from the West, and cottonwood trees speak to my Western soul. And so it's special to have one here. And this giant maple and this little microburst came through our valley. And I was standing with our goats as this storm and these heavy winds came through. We had all kind of taken shelter in one barn, and my husband was in another barn. And I watched as this storm came through, and this cottonwood tree, I mean, it bent at a level that I can't even begin to describe. It was much more than I ever would have imagined it capable of. And in my heart, I just felt this terror, that this dear tree would break in this windstorm. And what happened actually was another maple broke over the barn that my husband was in. And we, on the podcast, we talk a lot about how interconnected we are with everything, but I had these very personal relationships with both of these trees, and it left a deep grief. Like it left a grief that's still with me as things start to bud out and bloom. The missing maple is felt, and so I just want to thank you for the intimacy that you bring us into with trees and into your life too.
I think it's so lovely what you describe, because I think so many people, most of us, feel that about some set of trees. And I remember when Hurricane Sandy came through, we had this beautiful tree outside just outside the window here on Broadway that was toppled. And I feel like I still miss
Yeah.
its presence looking out this window every morning.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine recently moved from a house she had been in for decades because the neighbors next door cut down a big, beautiful old tree. And despite all the engagement of her community about please don't do that. So I think what you described, that worry about losing them, and then that feeling of loss when you do,
Yeah.
is really, I think, is very common. Is your husband fine? Was he fine? The barn
Yeah.
fine?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
felt really lucky. They had been out, I mean, maybe just 10 seconds before, him and the horses and the barn broke the fall of the tree, and we all felt very lucky, and, one of the cottonwood branches snapped, but the rest of the tree is all right.
Wow. Well, I'm very glad
Um,
for that.
Me too. I wanna maybe bring us in. I was really struck in the book, right? And I'll introduce readers. We'll have an intro at the beginning of this so everybody can hear. But I was really struck in your book, Take to the Trees, a story of hope, science, and self-discovery in America's imperiled forest. That we as the reader are brought into this very different vantage point alongside you as you experience these women's tree climbing workshops with Bear and Melissa, and you learn to go from a groundie to someone who is in the branches. I felt like throughout the book you offered us that a very different vantage point on trees and plants themselves, on climate change, a different vantage point on our relationship with our environment and with other humans, and also with ourselves as you kind of take us on your own journey of transformation alongside these trees. And so I think wanted to ask how the process of writing this book really how the process of learning how to climb trees changed your vantage point.
Um, I mean, I do feel very different having learned how to climb and having been in that an extraordinary community. And I think that it was, as you read about, very, very challenging in many ways. But as I think most of the women going through that workshop have experienced, it does transform you and connect you to strength. And
Yeah.
I think writing the book for me, because I've been very traditional in my writing as a
Mm.
journalist. I have not written in the first person. I've
Mm.
not written a memoir. I've not
Yeah.
written an essay. I was really touched by one of the reviewers' comments who like listed all the genres that the book was sort of um, hoping to weave together. And
It did. No hoping. It wove a lot
okay,
together.
thank you. But I think that approaching it in that way was very, very new for me, and I think that really came out of this experience climbing the trees and being with these extraordinary people.
Yeah, I felt that you take us on this journey of you gaining a very different sense of, I guess, embodiment through this act of climbing trees, and I think that comes through in how connected all of these topics are within the book. I mean, like I said, no hoping necessary. You weave together a lot of disciplines, a lot of thoughts in this beautiful, might I say, rope-like fashion, right? That you're
Yay!
yay. That you're twining these things together, as we learn, and I think that It really amazed me to see and to experience alongside of you how much confidence learning this skill gave you, and also being held both by this group of women that kind of shifts a little bit and changes, and by the trees themselves. Thank you for tuning into this conversation with Marguerite Holloway about her new book, Take to the Trees. As the seasons shift, I'm thinking more and more about staying hydrated and nourished, especially when I'm out there doing the work, whether that's on the farm or in the forest. That's where Redmond Real Salt's Relight Hydration Powder comes in. Packed with electrolytes and magnesium glycinate, which is super bioavailable, and 60 plus trace minerals from an ancient seabed in Utah, Relight Hydration Powder helps keep me fueled and hydrated during long days in the heat. It's the perfect way to stay energized too. And I want to mention this, that low sodium can play a role in feeling fatigued. And so whether I'm lifting hay bales, picking up tools, or climbing trees, which I plan on doing a lot more of after reading this book, it is my absolute favorite. And I love the pina colada flavor. It's like a tropical forest vacation in a packet. And I love, especially for this season, as my garden comes online, having a big 25-pound bag of salt for all of my pickling and preserving and salty needs year round. You can get 15% off your order at redmond.life with the code mindbodysoil_15. And that link is in the show notes as well. And let's get back to our conversation with Marguerite.
Yeah. And I think for me, I think we all have that, and I write about that, excuse me, that connection to trees as kids when we we feel that they are accessible and we connect with them, and we feel that they're, if we're lucky enough to be around them a bunch, that they are our friends, that they are these secret worlds, that they are these places of exploration and of safety and of refuge.
Yes.
And I think that most of us lose that as we get older. And the women's tree climbing workshop and arborists and people who engage with trees all the time don't lose that. And they have that incredible sense of connection and being in the trees and being held by the trees, and seeing the world from that, different vantage point that you were talking about earlier. I feel like I just rambled and didn't answer your question.
No, that was
Did I?
perfect. That wasn't a
Okay.
question. We're just
Okay,
we're just
good.
rambling back and forth together.
All right, good.
That's oftentimes how things go on here. It's a mutual rambling.
Is it okay to, I forgot to tell you at the very beginning, the coincidence that,
Oh, please.
so when my daughter graduated from college, or before, I'm sorry, right, but when she graduated from high school, she took a gap year and she went and worked abroad. She was working on a farm and as an au pair. Then the pandemic hit and she came back, and she really, to New York City, and she really wanted to be working on a farm. And my family had just started following Big Sky Caroline.
Yes.
Instagram, and were just blown away by her story, by the stories she told. So my daughter reached out to her and was going to be her first intern on the farm, and they were setting that up. And then it became clear like how dire COVID was, and what exactly the limits were going to be on travel. And so she never did it. But Big Sky Caroline is like is very famous in our household, and someone we really revere. And I was so delighted to see that she's a regular, or at least twice, right?
She's a friend.
That's amazing. Anyway.
Oh, what an incredible, what an incredible coincidence and story. Caroline is near and dear to my heart. I'm so sorry that your daughter didn't get to have that experience. First of all, I hope that she found something that filled that space. But I love that coincidence because Caroline is very dear to me. I was actually just I'm guiding a panel in Montana in June about rural economies, and Caroline's going to be on it,
That's
and so we
excellent.
were just voice noting last night, and so that's really great.
Tell her
She's
she
a
has a whole family fan club in New York City.
Oh, I
Probably
absolutely
many.
will. I absolutely will. She will love that, and I'm glad your daughter got that sense of experience, because farms are special places, and that I think it's about that sense of connection, right? And I think a lot of us, that you find throughout the book with trees. I think that farms are also another way into what you so beautifully said is a sort of rekindling of that childhood continuity and curiosity and entanglement with the world around us,
Yeah.
and it's hard to recapture as an adult, and it's beautiful when it happens. um I thought maybe, you brought up a word that I kept coming back to. I don't know if you explicitly said it in the book, but trees as a place of refuge. And I think that there's a lot that can be said for this, both literally and emotionally. That trees are a refuge, that they are, very much such a deep part of our ecosystems and climate and world in what they create in transpiration, in shade, in the incredible organisms that support soil and that interact with all this other plant life, but that there is also a sense of, I don't know, personal refuge there, right? That I kept thinking as you explored your journey in the book that trees are a soft place to land for something being so hard and so high up.
Yes, I think that's really true. And as I wrote in the book, for so many of the people I met, trees are a refuge for them. They said again and again, that trees saved their lives.
Yeah.
And I think I hear that a lot, and not from the people that I interviewed for the book, but I think people do feel that sense of of connection and protection. Um,
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that's been really hard to read about, particularly as climate change gathers force, um, that so many trees have been destabilized and weakened, and that people are scared of trees because of some of these events, and for good reason. They've had
Yeah.
really horrific experiences, and I think we're at a moment when I don't know, we're at a very precarious moment. I think
I agree.
I'm not alone in that, but um, where we see the natural world with its power and force, and that it is very scary. Um, and trees, unfortunately, I think are during some of these events really becoming objects of fear.
Yeah. Yeah. And a very vulnerable. They're occupying a very vulnerable space. I mean, I think a lot of things are, but I'd love to touch on that because throughout the book, you kind of catalog all of these different trees and some of their many strengths and some of the beautiful systems and biologies that are inherent to these different tree species, but you also catalog how our climate is deeply, deeply affecting them and really changing them and putting them at risk and at danger of extinction, and just how many trees are in that space, and aspen and Atlantic white cedar and ash and hemlock, and all of these different pieces where trees are susceptible to to heat, to pest pressure, to different fungal pressures, and really, I don't know, bit of canaries, these telltale signs of how our world is changing. Um, and if there were some common threads that you saw between all of these trees as they experience climate change. In today's conversation with Marguerite Holloway, we talked about what it means to be grounded or to be a groundie, which is when you're the partner on the ground in tree climbing. So both literally and figuratively. And so speaking of staying grounded, because I love to make tenuous connections to ads on this podcast, I want to give a shout out to Beeches Grounded Footwear, which is my shoe of choice. These shoes keep me connected to the earth no matter where I am, whether I'm on the farm, hiking, or climbing trees. They have a wide toe box, zero drop, and flexible soles that allow your body and your foot to move how it's meant to. And I can attest to this because I just broke my toe and I wouldn't put my feet in anything else. So whether I'm on the ground or in the trees, I'm loving how Beeches shoes help keep me grounded by allowing the electrons from the earth to flow through the shoe and into my body. You can get 10% off when you go to the behex.co and use the code KATE10 at checkout. That's BAHE.co and use the code KATE10 at checkout. You can support your feet and the earth and support this podcast with every step. Now, back to the show with Marguerite.
I think that I wrote in, I can't remember where exactly, I think it was in the sources or acknowledgments section of the book, that the book really arose out of a couple of things. But one of the main things was an article that I had done for the New York Times about New England's forests. And that came about because of a conversation with an arborist who sort of showed me, I looked at the forest and everything looked great. And he was like, no, just look at this, look at this, look at that, look at that. And I began to get sort of an inkling of how the forests look for people who really know them well. And I think that when you begin to talk to people who know the forests and trees intimately, you become aware that they are seeing things that most of us just don't see. And climate change is affecting the trees in many, many ways. And it is also hitting at a time when there are more and more pests that have come from different places that they are not equipped to deal with. And those could be, insects, those could be fungi, those could be water molds or phytophthora. And so they're really under siege from so many different things simultaneously and at a speed that is just, it's just way too fast for them to adapt. And so climate change is affecting them in many, many ways, and it's sort of exacerbating the other stresses that they are already experiencing.
Yeah, you did such a beautiful job of weaving together the complexity of the sort of converging forces that are threatening trees, that it's a warming climate, that it's and we've explored a lot around globalization and trade on the podcast. And so the piece about how we move resources, I have a beautiful quote from you and how we move resources. And you say, what we have been doing is moving things around, at first slowly, and in the first millennia of our floral faunal relocations, often with good results for our diet and well-being, and then with increasing velocity, volume, variety, and havoc, often causing the extermination of people and species. For long-lived trees, international trade is often a catastrophe. And so, cataloging that this is a complex convergence of factors that trees are facing.
Yeah. And you asked about the different species, and I think that almost all tree species are experiencing many of the same things, but what I tried to do, because there are so many things,
Mhm.
was use one different tree to explain one aspect of it,
Mm.
of the issues and the challenges, even though each tree could probably tell all those stories.
Yeah.
It seemed an easier way to kind of survey the different aspects or dimensions of it by looking at individual tree species. But I hope that by the end it becomes clear that like they're all they're all experiencing a lot of these things at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was a really beautiful way for us as readers to come into it. And I think it also, and I'll say that, this other piece that you wove in was it was a really incredible opportunity to explore the very different biologies of these different trees, to explore how much different aspens are as a species from oak, or to explore the movement of magnolias and their branches. Yeah, that's really sitting with me this morning. um, or the dance of aspen leaves. You have a really beautiful paragraph about the dance of aspen leaves from the unique position of their petiole, and yeah, and some of the different properties and biologies of these trees, and how much they've been shaped by their respective ecosystems, and the beautiful mutualism they're bringing into that space. And so you see both this incredible strength and variation, while you see these tender vulnerabilities.
Mm. I'm curious, do you have a favorite tree? You mentioned the cottonwood before and sort of
Yeah.
its connection to the West, and that you're near a forest now in the Northeast and different tree species. Is there one that speaks to you? I'm always curious about that.
I don't think I can tease out my memories of my entire life without there being cottonwood trees in them.
That's
Um,
great.
when I was growing up, I lived in Colorado, and we were near a canal. It was this old canal and irrigation ditch that had kind of run through, and it was lined with cottonwoods. And in the summer, they'd release their cotton, and their leaves dance in a similar way to aspens, and birch, not quite the same, but they do have some similarities. And then, when we moved here, that cottonwood tree that's out, I can see just the edge of it outside my window,
Mm,
felt like this little piece of home. And so I think that has been something. And I've gotten to know so many more hardwood trees moving
mm,
back east. That's not something that you see as much out west. I sit on the board of a forest center because it's something that I've wanted to get to know better. And so there's a 3,500-acre parcel right here in Vermont, where they're really working to preserve biodiversity and to look at these trees closely and how to steward them into the next
mm.
100, 200 years. And so I've gotten to know other trees I love, but cottonwoods.
That's great.
Do you have one that is particularly close to you?
I mean, I love aspen so much.
Yeah.
I've really come to love, although I haven't met many of them, the araucarias, um,
Mhm. Yeah,
and
yeah.
I really love hornbeam, and I love the hemlocks. Yeah, it's
Mm,
very hard.
yeah, it is very hard. Maybe this is a good spot. You kind of inherit this love, but it's not an inheritance that you knew at first. And I found the connection to your mother to be so incredible, and she has this sort of quiet guiding hand throughout the book as you explore these different trees. And so I wonder if you might just speak to that briefly here. Hey everyone. If you've been loving the podcast and want to help keep it going, I would love to have you as a part of the interwoven network of support for this podcast. I have links to a Patreon and a Substack in the show notes, and while there isn't extra content or perks right now, that is coming. And it would be nice to have your support for the cost of a single coffee each month. It's a simple way to help me continue creating these deep and meaningful conversations with people I admire. Think of it as creating a mycelial network in a forest. Your support and a few dollars a month helps me share these stories and create thriving forests of episodes for us to tune into. If you value what I'm doing, check out those links in the show notes. And if you want to support for free, which this is the best way to support the podcast. You can share this episode or another episode you loved with a friend. Hit subscribe so you can tune in to all the fun episodes that we have coming up, and leave a rating and review. Your support really does mean everything for me. Thank you for being a part of my mycelial network just by listening. Now, let's get back to our interview with Marguerite.
Yeah, I mean, she was such a powerful force for me and my brother growing up, in that she loved being outside, and she was just obsessed with us learning the names of trees and different species and doing collections and um, learning the names of flowers and, doing little um, samples, water sampling in ponds. And
Amazing.
yeah, she was extraordinary that way. And even when we weren't visiting my grandmother in this forest and pond landscape in the Catskills, she took us into Riverside Park in New York City and had us learn all the trees there. And she did it in such a wonderful way, because she really fused the science. We read a lot of science books aloud, but she also read us so much fiction and so many picture books. And so in my mind, these worlds of science and of narrative and story and imagination and magic are sort of all fused, because she treated them with equal excitement and an equal weight. And so I feel very connected to the natural world and to trees because of her. And then, as you read in the book, she passes, and I discover this incredible tree journal that she kept, that it is extraordinary to me that I had not found it before, because I had moved her and I had gone through everything, and we had really sort of streamlined her life. And there was one bookshelf, and it was on that bookshelf. And how I didn't see it before then, until I was cleaning out her apartment after she died, I really don't know. And it feels to me like there's a little bit of magic in that.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
amazing. And then, sorry.
No, go ahead. Keep going.
Well, and then, as the book describes, there's this process of coming to realize, like you put it so beautifully, this guiding hand, which I had, I end up in a place that is very connected to her without knowing that I was going to get there. And that was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say what it is.
We won't. We'll keep that. No, we'll keep that to ourselves.
But that is, I really like the way you put that. That's quite right.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And I can't wait for readers to go on this journey, because there's a little bit of a mystery. I'll just say that there's a little bit of a mystery that's kind of unfolding alongside this for you, and where it takes you. And it's just it's a really beautiful piece, and a really, and I'll say this, you wrote about grief very tenderly. That's something that we touch a lot on the podcast. And I think that there's an incredible sense of being held in the natural world. I mean, and it's all continuous. We're natural, but to put our grief in these spaces, to let these spaces hold us in that,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that sometimes even people can't.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
I think that's absolutely right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I want to touch on this magic and wonder. I thought it was I love the way you put that your mother reading you very scientifically rigorous things and also narrative. That so clearly is woven into the way that you write. And I think I would be remiss. Let me find it in my notes. I think I would be remiss if I didn't share this piece about magnolias that I think we kind of hinted at
Yeah.
earlier, because I think it really illustrates how much wonder you're able to bring, how much magic you can find in the incredible and often hidden from us science of trees in particular. And so you say, like many trees, magnolia can move at night. Recordings of birch, cypress, cedar, oak, maple, and other tree species made with laser scanners revealed that branches move, sometimes by many inches, sometimes assuming new configurations by morning. Species vary greatly in their nocturnal bending and stretching. Southern magnolia has the most unusual and evocative pattern. Over the course of one night, the tree's branches trace the same movement 3 times, like a Buddhist prostration, like a dancer practicing her choreography, like a refrain.
Mm.
And I loved this so much. I mean, again, there's a deep intimacy and sort of knowing this and beginning to see these trees differently, and you weave that magic and wonder of what is right outside for many of us our doors,
Yeah.
just really beautifully.
Thank you. It is, I mean, the science of trees is extraordinary. And I feel as though, and one of the scientists who I spoke with a lot for the book, Tim Brodrib, who's at the University of Tasmania, is so eloquent about this. But he really talks about how if you look carefully and you look closely and at a different time scale. And the laser scanners are one
Mm,
example of that, but he also uses these instruments um, that many tree scientists do, these little cameras and sensors, um, and you can see the tree going through these movements that if we were just slower or they were faster or we sped up our vision of them, we would understand that they're so similar, they're so like. I think he puts it in the book that
I
it's
have the
very
quote.
you have the quote. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
if
would
you
be
want me to
great
read
because
it.
please, I would.
He says, and this is from, it's Tim Brodrip, right?
Yeah.
This is from Tim Brodrip. He says, when a tree draws water from the soil, its leaves shrink, like when we suck in our cheeks. When the water arrives in the canopy, leaves swell. It's a real eye opener when you realize that you're dealing with something that's pretty analogous to animal behavior, Brodrib says. You get this beautiful little heartbeat of the plant through the day.
Yeah, it is amazing. It is amazing. And I feel, and he says this, and I know this because of him and the other researchers in the book, that like the science of our understanding of these trees is really just on the edge. Like we're
Yeah.
just beginning to see things in new ways. It's really an extraordinary time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think about that a lot with soil, and I'm not sure I was aware of that edge with trees too, as much as I was after reading your book. But I really do think that we're just getting a peek of the wonder and the magic and the mutualism and the just indescribable complexity of what is right beneath our feet and right in our own backyards. I think this might actually be a great place to talk a little bit about plant blindness, because I loved this piece, and we might be going a little bit in reverse here, but there is this incredible thing when you begin to really see, and throughout the book you talk about your joy as you're able to identify more and more trees without an app, that they become more known to you. But we're so very dependent on plants for a lot of different reasons, and yet we don't always see them in the way that we've just been talking about. And you talk about this both in today's terms, but also in terms of how we correlate the evolution of species, that we really depend on zoic. I have this quote here on zoic terms, which is these geological timescales based on animal evolution, versus being phytic, right? Versus it being about plant evolution. But that plant evolution is often preceding that they are creating the world in which we are able to thrive.
Yeah, that was one of the most amazing. I was reading, I can't remember, is Alfred Traverse, who's the scientist who I think wrote about that. You probably have the quote
I
right
do.
there.
Yeah. I do.
But that was mentioned in this incredible book about plant evolution. And I just, it really, I had never thought about that. And it was amazing to me that he had written this paper. I think it was in '88, and that they were writing about this in this book. And I'm sure many people in the community know that and think about it all the time. But for someone coming from the outside, it just blew me away.
Me too.
And then there was another one of these connections, because I was mentioning it, how that had struck me so much, to Nan Crystal Ahrens, who talks a lot about plant evolution in the chapter about plant evolution. And it turned out that Alfred Traverse was her advisor. And there was all this connection that I hadn't even known about. But yes, do you have the quote? Because I think it's really
yeah.
okay.
You say, so it's kind of embedded in yours. You say, plant blindness can be found everywhere. Plants are the foundation for most animal life, but they don't even get their own column in the standard geologic scale diagram, as Catherine J. Willis and Jennifer Mickelwain note in The Evolution of Plants. The authors reproduce an alternative chart published in a 1988 article. Quote, "Plant evolution dances to a different beat," by paleobotanist Alfred Traverse. Quote, "In fact, major plant evolutionary breakthroughs seem generally to precede similar, perhaps to some degree dependent, vertebrate land animal events," end quote. Traverse noted, "The major divisions or eras of the geological timescales are zoic, based on animal extinction or evolution, but they should perhaps be phytic, based on plants instead."
Yeah, it's so interesting. And the plant blindness that you're talking about, you're talking about it now sort of from the evolutionary perspective and the scientific perspective. And then, we have it every day in terms of just not seeing the trees, or not seeing how the trees are doing, or not seeing other plants. It's sort of like this inability to recognize, and everybody who works with trees and in forests is plant blindness is talked about all the time. That the public, most of us, I don't mean all the public, but a lot of us just don't see them in that, with that granular resolution.
No, and I think maybe we don't, that dependency that we have on plants, I think, is obfuscated in the way that our modern world works. And through no fault of any one individual's own, we just don't have that same relationship where several thousand years ago, 15,000 years ago, before the dawn of agriculture, our dependency on those plants created an immediacy of that dependency where it was really seen to us. It wasn't hidden in boxes shipped to our doorstep, or we had to make shelter from these plants. We had to eat from these plants. We had to navigate and live and understand the subtle cues of these plants so that we could better understand where we sat in that web of life, and what weather patterns were coming, or how fire was moving through a landscape, or whatever that was. And so I think that that's something that we've been very disconnected from. And one
Yeah.
of the things I think you really offer in the book is this way in, this point of connection that all of these women are finding through these tree climbing workshops from a very diverse set of backgrounds. Not that you might think that this is all arborists, and I think I would have thought that had I seen a tree climbing workshop, and yet that's not the case at all.
No, it's so many women from so many different, exactly as you say, backgrounds. There are, as you know, aerial artists and writers and photographers and scientists, and it is just amazing to learn about and to speak with many of the people who had gone through it. Most are arborists who are really trying to get into the trees and develop skills and find mentorship and community, but it's such a broad array of people and people who just want to be in trees. It's extraordinary that there is this group that can help you get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for whom I also write about this, but for whom, like when they, and Bear says this so beautifully, when they look at the landscape, that they have no plant blindness. That's what they see. It's just this, they foreground what the rest of us, or many of us, background. And I just think that way of seeing is so critical, and is so it's so important. It does bring a lot of complexity with it, though, I have to say, because once I started to see, as the arborists were teaching me, and the biologists and the foresters, once I started to see what's happening with the trees, it's very hard to unsee that. And and I was really a bit of a downer on, like, any car trips that I took with my family. Everyone would be chatting, and I'd be like, "Look at that! Look at that whole hillside! Look at that! Look at that!" Everyone's like, "Ah!"
Yeah.
So, and that is hard. Um, and yeah,
It is. It is. I mean, I have some experience with that as well. Just uh, doing the work that I do, and it is something that you can't unsee. That and I, eh, in reading this book, was peeking out. I was walking around outside, and as all of the buds come up right now, right, we're right in this really extraordinary growth phase for trees where the cambium is coming alive, and I've learned so much now that I'm thinking about what's happening on the inside of trees as I walk around the farm, but noticing where those leaf buds weren't budding out, right, where there was more, where there wasn't action, where there wasn't life happening on the edges of these trees, and just beginning to see that. I think that can be hard. I think that comes with I think it comes with a natural sense of grief.
yeah.
Um, yeah, for what we're losing in the natural world.
One of the arborists talks about that, and how sometimes she likes the winter because you can't tell what's it's supposed to look
Yeah. Is this
denuded. And
yeah.
yeah,
Is this Diana Six, who also called herself she called herself a coroner,
Yes.
which broke my heart.
Yes, she actually, I think, started talking about that several years ago. It was in a may have been in an article for The Guardian. She has been feeling that way for quite some time, she says. The arborist I was referring to was June Mollis, who has been seeing a lot of the beech leaf disease. But Diana Six, yes, um, is uh, has seen a lot of ecological devastation, as she describes.
Yeah. I wonder, I was thinking kind of where we started talking about the vantage point from higher in the canopy and how that might change the way that one could view the world or themselves or climate change or trees as a whole. And then this not being able to unsee some of the devastation in our landscapes once you become aware to it, once you take off those blinders. But I think that we can also and I think we have to hold them both, right? I want to be really clear here that to hold them both, we can also see some hope and some resiliency too, and some incredible. I think one of the most powerful things about the book for me right now, as it's still kind of settling in me, was this peek at the biology of trees, at what incredible organisms, of beings that they are, and that there is some hope of resiliency, I think, both within the biology, but also in this incredible community of care that's cropping up. And I think that was a piece that I really felt as you go through these workshops with Bear and Melissa, um, is that sense of community.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I think when we do hear stories of hope and resilience right now in particular, it is really it is community driven. It is
Yeah.
community rooted. And um, yes, I absolutely agree. And I think, if people can foreground the trees in a way that and can understand what they most of us organically feel, some connection to them or some sense of wonder or appreciation for various aspects of them. I think that there is, a huge amount that we can do as individuals and within communities,
Yeah.
yeah, to improve the situation of trees and there therefore ourselves.
Both. I have a quote, and I don't know if this is what you meant by this, so you can feel free to correct me if this doesn't go here. But I think it really spoke to this, and it was also just such a beautiful. I mean, I was absolutely transported in reading it to the Rocky Mountain West in the fall, watching the Aspens dance. But I think that this spoke to something, and I think Aspens also speak to sort of what a connected community can do from their biology. So you say, quaking aspen are one of my favorite trees. I can sit for hours enthralled by their particular dance. Populus tremuloides, the tremulous, trembling aspen. In aspen and all poplars, the petiole or stem that connects leaves to branches is long and flat instead of round as in most other deciduous trees. Not only is it flat, but it connects to the leaf on a perpendicular. Leaf latitude meets petiole longitude and adventure follows. When wind catches the petioles and leaves, it seems as if it is arriving from all directions at once. Green or gold, an aspen canopy flashes and shimmers in even a sigh of a breeze. Watching aspen makes me feel that I am breathing underwater, that I am living in a sea of wind. Watching aspen is like watching truths made visible. Everything is somehow connected. Tiny movements have huge impacts. Thousands of leaves can each dance their own riff and be part of one tree. Marguerite, this was just, I mean, this was so beautiful. I have shivers, and I feel like I'm an aspen tree in that. Um,
Uh,
all of my little goose pimples, right, standing on end like petioles.
oh, I'm so glad. That was one of the most important paragraphs for me because I kept trying to figure out why I can sit for hours. Like
Mm.
why I can just like I just watch the wind in Aspen for it just and it took so long to try to sort through why it feels like that. So I that means a lot to me that you have chosen that passage because I felt like I finally figured it out.
Feels like breathing underwater, living in a sea of wind. It does, right? And it echoes for me. Thinking about this, right? Especially when you're little and you're in the pool or you're in a body of water and you look up and the way the sun comes through and kind of moves with the
Mm.
shimmering of a surface. That there is something so fluid and liquid and everywhere about Aspen.
I'm really, it means a lot to me that
Mm.
passage spoke to you and that you read that aloud. That really is very moving to me. Thank you.
Yeah, it spoke to me deeply, and I think it also spoke to me of, one of the things that I really felt in your personal journey through the book is how much you gain a sense of confidence and maybe some agency as you learn to climb trees and feel more proficient in that space, feel more comfortable in that space. And I think within that, there's this idea tiny movements have huge impacts, right? That we can all be these leaves dancing our own riff. And with that recognition, right, removing those blinders, no more plant blindness, that we are a part of one metaphorical tree, one organism that's so deeply interconnected, that it returned a sense of agency to me at the end of the book, that our individual care matters.
I'm very glad that yes, everything you say, it's exactly true. The climbing it did, it did change me and it did happen as you described with small things, like a small thing changing, and then that small thing turned out to be a huge thing.
Yeah.
And yes, and the joy of being up in the trees is, I can still feel it. I haven't been up in a tree for a while. I need to get up in the tree soon, um, but I can still feel that, and I can close my eyes and be there and feel that um, groundedness, which so many
Yeah.
arborists, Bear and Melissa and so many of the women that they've taught and that they work with, the instructors, that feeling of you don't think of it, but that you're grounded high up, you're grounded in a tree. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, what a beautiful paradox too, to be high up and yet grounded, and to be in that. I mean, I'm so curious. Just to be very honest, after reading the book, I can't stop thinking about climbing a tree in this way, to learning that.
Yeah, you should.
It very much calls to me. um, Wonder if I might, as we kind of wind forward, I also want to hold this other piece that I have here around hope. And especially, we've talked a lot about foregrounding. And I really like that you bring this term. I don't know if you've read Marcia Bjornerud's books on geology. Are absolutely gorgeous, and I think you'd really like them. Timefulness and Turning to Stone. Turning to Stone and your book she brings some memoir pieces into it in a really beautiful way and brings some grief in too. And she talks a lot about foregrounding Earth, what it would mean to have Earth, and how alive and movement centered it is, even though we can't see it. It's happening deep and beneath our feet into the foreground. And so she uses that same terminology, which I really love, because I think it speaks to, oftentimes we're looking at so much, and to kind of, our eyes are incredible at being able to pick things out and being able to sort of focus in on something and then open back up into panoramic vision to receive that whole picture. And so I loved this idea of foregrounding trees and our connection to them. And again, this piece about holding both the truth of the matter, which is that trees and so many organisms on our planet are at this very precarious point, to use your word from the beginning. And when we see them, there's that possibility for change. And I just pulled this quote that you said about your mother. You said, "I tend now to foreground what my mother made from her trauma, to look more at the green shoots, less at the gray stump, renewal arising from blight." And I think that's such a perfect synthesis of holding both, right? That there is this blight that's occurring and this opportunity at the same time.
Yeah. I think at the workshop, Bear and Melissa show so much, like, and what is happening to the trees and teaching us about the biology of trees and the threats to trees. And then yet we all get up into the trees, and there is this incredible sense of hope and transformation. It is, as you say, it's like it's the two things together, and it's very important to have both those things, that
Yeah.
incredible awareness and understanding in detail and with evidence and with the science about what's happening, and then the sense of really of your own ability to change things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and I'll say this just because I want to be clear for listeners, that it's not always an equal balance, and that oftentimes that grief and that sense of precariousness can really be something big and something very real to hold.
Yeah.
Um, As we kind of begin to wrap up, one of the things I really want is for people to read the book, to go on this journey with you, to learn about white bark pine and beech and oak and aerial roots, and more about magnolia and just these incredible beings that we share Earth with. But I want to see if I missed anything that you feel like belongs here in this interview or this ramble back and forth.
No, I really appreciate your questions. I also really appreciate what you were drawn to and
Mm,
the quotes that you read. It means uh, as a particularly the Aspen one, but many others too. So, and um, and you're very careful reading. So I can't think of anything.
okay. Well,
But I really enjoyed this conversation a lot, and I do hope people read the book, and I hope that that they go to the workshop and get up into the trees, and yeah,
I was gonna say I really I can't wait for people to read the book, and I know that they're gonna pick it up because it's just it's so stunning, and I couldn't put it down. It was such a pleasure to read it closely, because I was just you brought me into that world, just like being a little kid again. And you opened up this new world to me that I'm really excited to explore and to treasure the trees in and around me even more. But also to point people to these women's tree climbing workshops,
Yeah.
which is now on my radar. And I'll find some links to put in the show notes for people to Bear and Melissa's tree climbing workshops, because I think that this is such an incredible space and community that they have clearly spent so much time and care building.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
great.
Well, thank you, Marguerite. I just really appreciate
Thank
this.
you.
I'll have just to wrap up, I'll have links for everybody to find you in the show notes, and to find the book, and there will be a little introduction with your bio and a little bit more about Take to the Trees, because I just want for everybody to read this book.
Thank you.
It was so precious. And on a personal note, I was gonna say I'm gonna share this. I'm going to share this and maybe see. So I sit on the board of, it's called Merck Forest and Farmland. It's in southern Vermont. And Rob, who's the executive director there, does such an incredible job of illustrating sort of our connection to a forest. So it's 3,500 acres, and they bring in arborists and biologists, but they also practice some sustainable forestry and do some hole punch logging to sort of mimic some old growth patterns, and then they study it over years to see its effects. And all of the barn buildings are built with wood from the forest, which I think is a really cool way for us to see that connection again, like to see that dependency, to see that immediacy. But I'd really like for the board to read the book, and that's something that I'm going to recommend. And if you find yourself out that way, I'd love to, I don't know, go for a walk or something like that, because
I would love that. I will definitely be out that way.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to come up here. You should come up. There's a great bookstore in Manchester, Vermont called Northshire.
Oh,
it's just this
okay.
stunning, I mean, pretty big, 100-plus-year-old bookstore. They do some readings, and I selfishly really would like you to come up and do that.
That's great. I will reach out to them. That sounds wonderful.
I'd be happy to reach out to them too, and just urge as a customer that that's something I would love to see.
That's even better. Okay.
Why don't I do that?
Okay.
That?
That's
thank
great.
you. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for this gift of a book. I just think it's so beautiful, and I can't wait for people to read it.
Thank you. And this was so lovely. Thank you. This wonderful conversation, and a real pleasure.
Yeah, and I'll have this out with the book. I'll talk to, is it Erin? Yeah, it is Erin. Mm-hmm. I'll talk to Erin, but I think that this will come out on the 13th, I believe, with the release of the book. And okay. I'll send her links, and I'll be promoting it on social media. And
that's lovely.
I'm going to tell Caroline about this right when we get off.
Tell Caroline.
I will. I'm going to. I can't wait. I can't wait. Marguerite, thank you. Thank you for everything, and thank you for your time. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.
Oh, one little piece. You're 99% uploaded. Will you just leave your browser up just for a second, and it'll say 100% uploaded, just so that I have that full file once you leave here?
Okay. So
it'll just don't close your computer immediately. Just give it a couple, probably about 1 minute to finish loading.
Hit leave, but then leave it open for a minute or so.
Just for a minute, yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a wonderful day.
You.
Bye.
You too.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mind, Body, and Soil podcast. If what you found resonated with you, may I ask that you share it with your friends or leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts? This act of reciprocity helps others find Mind, Body, and Soil. If you're looking for more, you can find us at groundworkcollective.com and at Kate_Kavanaugh, that's KATE_KAVANAUGH on Instagram. I would like to give a very special thank you to China and Seth Kent of the band All Right for the clips from their beautiful song Over the Edge from their album The Crucible. You can find them at All Right on Instagram and wherever you listen to music.